I get so enough one.
Okay, we're on. All right, welcome everybody. Today is Wednesday, February 20th, February 15th, 2023. I'm ahead of myself, I guess. I will go ahead and call the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners and make it to order. We have all three county commissioners here today, Commissioner Hall, Commissioner Miller, and myself. So we do have a quorum. First, we're going to do the adoption of the consent calendar. Is there any items staff or commissioners want to pull up, discuss, or would like more information about?
I have nothing. Thank you.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, not opposed, motion carries. Moving on to public hearing. We have resolutions adjusting the 2022-2023 adopted budget appropriations for Lincoln County in the creation of the Community Enhancement Projects Fund presented by Christina Scheer, our Finance and Accounting Director. Welcome, Christina.
Morning.
Good morning. And I did prepare a quick presentation. Hopefully we can get, there we go. And with your indulgence, I do want to just do a little bit of quick refresher on budget adjustments. We haven't done one yet this year. Or maybe we have, maybe I just don't remember. It's been that kind of year. But in any case, I just wanted to walk you and the audience through a little bit about budget adjustments, how they work, what the process is. So from a refresher standpoint, we adopt the budget once a year. It's in June. It starts in July. At that point, that adoption of that budget is basically the county's authority to spend. So that's you telling your department directors, go forth, use our resources to accomplish our goals. And so that's what this spend manage budget bubble is. And because we do budget prep, as you know, we're doing budget prep right now for fiscal 24. We do it well in advance. There are always things that come up between the time we prepare the budget, the time we adopt it, and the time we actually start to deploy our programs and resources. So we always have to adjust. It's never, it's generally not a big deal. I mean, this is a normal part of the budget process. So we can go through this adjust, the spend, manage, adjust, and spend, manage again. We can go through this multiple times. And in fact, I will tell you, this is not the last budget adjustment for this year that you will see. We still have many more to come. And then at some point, which is basically right now, we start looking at where we're at and we prepare for the next year and we just do it all over again. So that's what this cycle is for. I also wanted to take this opportunity to remind everyone about the roles that we all play in the budget. Obviously, you as the Board of Commissioners, your role is the primary role really is authorization. That should be the first thing there. But you review budgets, you oversee them, you make sure that everything's the way is consistent with your goals and objectives. But your role is that of authorization. Department directors, and I'm going to jump all the way over to the other side, they are responsible for executing programs. So they utilize resources in the form of staff and purchases to execute programs. They assess the needs of those programs. They manage the budgets they have. They manage the spending they have. And when they need an adjustment to the budget, they're the ones that initiate it. And that's something that I think is sometimes gets lost. Because you guys authorize, department heads initiate, finance is kind of that person in the middle that kind of marries the two together so that we make sure all of our legal obligations are checked off, that we've done all the proper filings, that we have all of the financial structures necessary to ensure compliance with grants and audits and internal controls and stuff. So as a matter of internal control, we don't actually initiate these things. So even though you see me here today bringing these budget adjustments, it's important for you to understand that I'm not here on my own behalf. I'm here on behalf of the department heads who requested these budget adjustments. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, you're the messenger.
I am the messenger. I'm the person in the middle. I will say I really liked the logo you used for department. It's very appropriate.
Oh,
Yeah. So yes, my role is record keeping. I use the baseball analogy a lot. We're not the player, finance, we're not the players. We're not the coaches, and we're not the umpires. We're the scorekeepers. And so our role really is coordination and record keeping. And I'm going to stop with your indulgence at this moment. I want to make sure I recognize that there's a couple people here that help me keep track of this, because there's a number of these budgets out there. Deanna and Renee, would you please stand up? So Deanna Carell, you're all familiar with her. She's my assistant finance director. You're all familiar, but you may not have had the opportunity to meet Renee. Renee is our budget and GL finance analyst. And so she's really the one that's helping us work through all of the details on this. And she's doing a lot of our OpenGov implementation for us. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to recognize them. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Key concepts, I just wanted again to kind of refresh, and I know you guys are all familiar with this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. This budget, everybody thinks of the individual department budgets that you see in this book as the budget, but the legal budget is actually an appropriation, and that's way in the back of the book. And it's actually at a much higher level than the detail pages you see. So an appropriation is a legally adopted budget. We operate our operational budget at a much lower level, at the fund department level, but our appropriation levels are really where we're trying to make these budget adjustments. Okay, so we have two different kinds of appropriations. We have program appropriations, which we use in the general fund. So that's general government, public safety, community services. And basically, it's just an accumulation of department budgets into a summarized appropriation. In all the other funds, we use category appropriations. So here again, we summarize all of the departments within a fund at the category level: personal services, materials and services, capital outlay, transfers, and so forth. And those are the category appropriations. A supplemental budget this is straight out of the Oregon Budget Manual. It's budget adjustment to meet unexpected needs or appropriate revenues not anticipated. That is key, because that is almost always why we do supplementals, so we get more money. We either have budget carryover from previous years for grants that we didn't budget, so we need to reappropriate. We get new grants that we didn't know about, so we need to appropriate for that. So that's the bulk of what we do in supplemental budgets. A hearing requirement is triggered because of the three main categories. If you increase a fund expenditures by more than 10%, if you create a new fund, or if you create a new category within a fund. So for instance, if you didn't have a capital outlay fund or category, but you did have materials and services and personal services, you don't have that capital outlay and suddenly you need to spend capital outlay, then that triggers a budget hearing to make that happen. Public notices are required for public hearings. We did do that public notice last week. It was, have that on there on the next page. We did do that. Let me go back. Resolution transfers. This is something that you're going to see a lot more of these, and we're going to have some conversations about how we want to handle those. That's basically moving money within appropriations. So for instance, if this is probably not a good example, but it is an example. If you wanted to shift appropriation from public safety to general government, that's called an appropriation transfer. Okay. So now we're here to the point where we actually are the reason for being here today. So we have 5 budget adjustments on the agenda today. 3 of them require the public hearing. So when I'm done with this little talk, we'll have you open up the public hearing and open up for comment on these 3 items. So in a public hearing, of course, the public must be given an opportunity to comment. We did publish on the 10th in the Newport News Times so that everyone knows not only that we are having a budget hearing, but what about. So there's a form and it showed the appropriations that we were modifying and so forth. So today's adjustments, Fund 102, the Economic Development Fund. This is where this was triggered because the Economic Development Fund did not have a capital outlay component. It didn't have an appropriation for capital outlay. We're establishing one. And so that's what this hearing is for. Fund 105 is establishing a new fund. This is a fund that we are creating to handle special revenues and programs. They're associated with the general fund, but they're dedicated funds. And we want to try and make it so that we can track color of money a little bit better. So we've created this fund to track a lot. This is primarily grants and outside assistance funds that we're creating. The first department in there is for GIS, and it's for the collection of assistance for GIS mapping. Fund 210 is the solid waste district. And this is the hearing was triggered on this one because it's an increase of more than 10% of total fund expense. It's kind of coincidental, but we actually have an example of every single reason why you need to have a public hearing. So those three are all public hearing. The other two budget adjustments we have in the general fund and in the capital projects fund do not technically require a budget hearing. Since we're here, there's no reason you can't hear comment on it, but you're not obligated to. Okay. And that's all I have as far as my presentation, but I'm certainly available for questions.
Questions from Commissioner Hall or Commissioner Miller?
We're creating a new fund, the Community Enhancement Projects Fund. What's the purpose or the scope of that?
Well, for today's action is primarily to establish a holding fund separate from the general fund, because we're attempting to get grants and assistance from other local governments to help fund our GIS aerial mapping. And you're going to see other budget adjustments for this fund where other specialized grants that are related to general fund programs, primarily public safety, some of our homeless, some of our hazard mitigation, these grants. As a practical matter and as a best practice, I don't want to run these through the general fund, because the general fund is largely for unrestricted revenues. And when you try and run restricted programs out of the general fund, it's not impossible to do the record keeping, but it gets messy. So what we're trying to do is streamline it a little bit better. We're also trying to make it a little bit easier for department and grant managers to manage those balance forward roll forwards, because that's something else that's very difficult in the general fund to do. This fund by design is going to be project controlled, which means every single transaction in this fund will be attached to a project which will have running balances that we will be able to track. We just can't execute that in the general fund because of the way it's structured. And so this is a special revenue fund created just to keep track of those special purpose funds. But this first go around is just for GIS, but you will see more budget adjustments for more.
Okay.
I think this
Follow
will
up.
help a lot. So I'm really happy to see us doing this. I think that sometimes, I think of it like everybody has a different color of water sometimes with funding, and we all pour it into one glass and it kind of turns brown. It's harder to pull out where the blue went. And so I see this as a way of keeping the blue liquid blue.
Absolutely.
Red liquid red,
Yeah.
and not pouring into that general fund where it gets messy.
So a follow-up question, if I may?
Absolutely.
Okay, so, and this may be more for Administrator Johnson, but as one example that comes to mind in this discussion is the $1 million grant we received from the state of Oregon for homeless planning, services planning. And right now, is that being run through? I assume that's being run through the general fund?
It is
No.
not. We
Oh,
actually
yeah,
established a
We
separate
did,
fund
that's
for
right,
that.
that's right.
And what I'm trying
But-
to forestall is, because this is a prime example of, if we'd had a fund like this at the time we got that grant, we probably would have set it up as a separate program in this fund rather than setting up a whole separate fund for it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because there is a kind of a general mandate to keep as a minimal number of funds, the least number of funds you need to do to execute your business. So we don't want to set up a new fund every single time we have something new. And that's part of what this fund is to keep us from doing.
Madam Chair, that was a question I had. We don't want hundreds of these funds, it sounds like, right? I mean, where's the balance?
Right. Well, and that's the trick, so the idea for this is to make this so that when we do have these projects that that are not permanent in nature. So in other words, we get a grant to do something and then that activity goes away. We want to run those through this fund rather than the general fund. Now, if there is another fund that makes more sense, so for instance, if we have a purely capital project type activity, then we're going to run it through capital projects. We've got some radio communications grants coming in. We're going to run that through radio communications. But the general fund doesn't really have a fund separate from the general fund to do this kind of thing. And that's really what this fund is to address. It's supposed to be walking kind of alongside the general fund. The general fund will have our normal operations and this fund will have all of our special projects.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and yeah, thank you for all of this. It's very, very helpful. Appreciate it.
Other questions, Commissioner Miller?
Madam Chair, I do not. It's time.
Okay, so I believe our next step is to actually, if we have all of our questions answered, open up the public hearing. So we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for resolutions adjusting the 2022-2023 adopted budget appropriations for Lincoln County and the creation of community enhancement project funds. Again, this would be for taking public comment on the three things listed previously, and then also the two adjustments that don't require a public hearing, but if people wanted to comment on those, they certainly could. So do we have anybody online that wants to provide public comment specific to these budget adjustments? Raise your virtual hand if you are online. And I don't see any virtual hands raised. Okay, do we have anybody in the audience that wants to provide public comment on these specific budget adjustment items? No? Okay, we will do our regular public comment later. This is just the budget pieces. So with that, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. All right. And then it looks like we're doing decision action today on resolutions for the budget. Or do we need to wait a week, Council Yule? Want to wait a week? Ms. Shearer, are any time constraints on waiting a week to adopt? No. Okay, then let's put this back on decision action for next week to come back. And actually, does that need to be decision action, Ms. Yule, or can we do consent? Consent? You okay with consent?
I'm fine with that.
Comfortable with
Okay,
that, yes.
back to consent next week then, Ms. Kelly, thank you. All right, still under decision action, the Lincoln County Fair Board appointments. So I think we discussed this previously, and I think we're ready to make an appointment. Mr. Johnson, anything to add?
No, Chair.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd be happy to make the motion appointing new members to the Lincoln County Fair Board.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye. And I'll save my happy dance till after the meeting.
Because you get off, I don't know, maybe a conflict there and putting
Yeah.
numbers on, yeah. All right, thank you. All right, moving on to discussion and information. We have a first reading of amendments to ordinance 471 related to environmental health presented by Kristen Yule, County Council.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kristen Yule, Lincoln County Council. This is the first reading of ordinance 471 amendments. Would you like the full reading or is title only? Okay.
I'm okay
Title
with
only.
Title only is fine, thank you.
Amending ordinance number 471 relating to environmental health and creating new provisions. This is really just an update because of changes to the administrative rules. So if you look in Exhibit A, there are updates to sections, basically just referencing the Oregon administrative rules and just changes in numerical numbering. So it's the standard.
So nothing much in practice that's changing. We're just making an amendment to keep up with the Oregon administrative rule numbering system.
That's correct.
Okay. Exciting stuff.
But
Any-
necessary.
Necessary.
Yeah.
Any questions, Commissioner Hall? Or
Nope.
Miller?
After looking over the amendments, it all seems pretty routine and not really substantive in nature, but just kind of updating with the latest rules and bylaws and procedures.
I just would add that we have 90 days. Is that correct? Before it's effective?
So we will go, Commissioner, in 2 weeks, we'll have the second reading.
Okay.
And then it would go into effect. Actually, the provisions I declared an emergency, so it would go into effect immediately.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I don't have any questions, so I think we'll bring it back for our second reading in 2 weeks' time.
Okay.
Okay, great. Moving
Thank
on to commissioner reports. Commissioner Miller, anything to report?
Well, I would say thank you for this amazing book here. It looks like a lot of work. It's really, really helpful. So whoever's brainchild this was, thank you for this. Administrator Johnson, thank you. But no, nothing else to report today. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Hall.
Yes, I have what is turning out to be, it seems like a weekly report on action on homelessness at the state level. And, some encouraging things are happening. Yesterday, House Bill 2001 passed out of the House Committee on Housing. It's kind of an omnibus of 5 bills related to housing and homelessness. And there's apparently been an agreement reached among legislative leadership to move this bill quickly. They say they want it to be on the governor's desk for signature by the end of March. There's still a lot of questions, even though it does seem to have the fast track momentum. I think we've all dealt with the legislature enough to know that things can sometimes go off the rails for the strangest of reasons. But one unanswered question is what kind of money will be attached to this? They're saying that that hasn't been determined. It's going to be separate from the $130 million that Governor Kotek has asked for to help the 10 counties in her initial order. So our approach right now is to, advocate for this, support it, but continue to pursue other avenues. We now have a data subcommittee of our House Bill 4123 Planning and Advisory Committee that is going to pursue the kind of the broader definition of homeless data that the governor's office provided for counties that want to apply for inclusion. And that work will continue. I had a conversation a few days ago with Commissioner Zan Ojero of Benton County, and she has a letter in draft form. I'm not sure if this will move forward or not, but if it does, I would recommend we look at signing on to it. Benton is also one of the counties, Lincoln and Benton are 2 of the 8 counties to receive the pilot planning grant under 4123. And overall of these 7 grants or 8 grants, 7 of them are in communities or regions not included in the governor's executive orders. So essentially, the argument in this letter is to make sure these 7 regions are included, based on, I think, the very real fact that these are communities that are already gearing up, wrestling with the problem, making plans, and that we would be in a good position to put to use any new state resources and hopefully put them to use quickly. So I guess stay tuned.
Great, thanks, Commissioner Hall.
Madam Chair,
Yep.
question, and I appreciate the work, and you've got upcoming public meetings as well in regard to your homeless committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are going to begin posting, the meetings as public meetings, not only of the main committee. I mean, we've kind of kept the door open, and as people have become aware and have asked to sit in on the meetings, we've welcomed them, but we will be moving to regular publication of public notices. And also, they're just starting to meet this week, but we've established 4 permanent subcommittees to work on different aspects of the plan. And we will publish notice of those meetings as well, in case people want to attend in person, as we're doing for the big committee, and then the subcommittees are going to be meeting online.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the details.
Certainly.
Yeah, so a couple of things I wanted to report during commissioner reports is we did find out yesterday that the county will be receiving dollars to build new mental health housing units. So big thanks to our HHS director, Jane Romero, who took the leadership in writing that grant, and I had a very small role in just connecting her to some people I met during the wildfire recovery process that are very good at providing technical assistance on housing projects. So happy to help there. Lots more to come with more information, but we did get the email from the state that we will be receiving that grant. So we still need to
Outstanding.
find some additional cost matching, but this covers most of those expenses to build this housing. We currently only have, like as of right now, we only have 9 dedicated units for mental health housing in the entire county, and this will build another, I think, close to 20. So very excited about that. So more to come later. I'm sure Jane can update us that on when we move through the project.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
And then the second thing is, I think, gosh, it wasn't even very long ago, maybe 2 months ago or 3 months ago, the county provided some funding with Commissioner Hall's leadership to the Yahats Presbyterian Church for pallet shelters. And those are up and operational. So big thanks to the Presbyterian Church and Yahats for taking leadership on that and ordering those and getting them installed and up and power.
Wow.
And
Madam Chair, how
all that,
many
so.
of them are there?
5,
I think
Five.
I was gonna say,
and each
yeah.
sleep 2 people.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting down there later
Yeah.
today and actually just going to look at them and see them in person. So
Mhm.
Today.
Yeah.
Oh,
today,
all
yeah,
right.
I have to go down there for something else. So I figured I would stop by. So. All right, that is all of my comments from the commissioner reports. Now we're moving on to public comment. We always have our smart sheet forms open online for written public comment. The cutoff date is the day before at noon to end up on today's public comment. So here's our written public comment that came in for this week. There we go. I think we received 3. All right, I'll just let you scroll there.
Relating to STRs in Gleneden Beach, it looks like. Yeah. Also relating to STRs. And also relating to STRs.
All right, and
All
then do we have anybody who wants to provide a public comment online today? If you would like to do that, raise your virtual hand. Nope, I don't see anybody. Okay, do we have anybody in person who wants to provide some public comment? Okay. I think she's gonna give me the sheet here. Emily, right? Welcome, Emily. If you want to state your name for the record, and public comment is 3 minutes. I think Commissioner Hall is my timer today, so.
Thank you. Emily DeHuff of Newport Beverly Beach. I am the president of Friends of Lincoln County Animals. My main motivation in coming here today was to help draw the widest possible attention to a wonderful letter that appeared in last Friday's News Times, commending the animal shelter staff for their heroic efforts in safeguarding a dog belonging to a homeless veteran who was hospitalized.
Yes, we read it at our
Yes.
meeting a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
Fantastic. Keith Barnes, the Lincoln County Veteran Services Officer, wrote this letter, took the trouble to document what the shelter had done that not only safeguarded this dog, but quite possibly saved the life of the veteran, literally. I was so uplifted by that. Our shelter staff is not only performing heroic and anomalous deeds of mercy, but daily heroics, unsung heroics under very adverse circumstances, short-staffed and housed in temporary quarters for more than 3 years now, that are not only really inadequate to the needs of the animals and the staff, but as I understand it, really not compliant with even legal minimum requirements for standards of care for animals in a shelter. I know that efforts are underway to secure a location for a new animal shelter. But there was another letter that appeared last Friday along with that one. And the subject of that one was a reference to a letter the previous week from someone else, both asking, what in blue blazes is going on with getting a location for a new animal shelter, for heaven's sake? When I was young, I used to laugh at my mother for calling people to tell them that she had nothing to tell them. But as I get older, I come to understand that telling people that you have nothing to tell them is not only courteous, but probably wise, because the silence on the matter from the county is the kind of darkness in which doubt and suspicion tend to flourish. And I'm hearing a lot of mistrust and misunderstanding out there among the public, thinking that the county isn't doing anything. I understand that there are reasons you can't talk about what you are doing, but I do think it's important to tell people that you are doing something, but you can't talk about it just yet. I would suggest very strongly that you put an item on as an agenda soon for a Board of Commissioners meeting, just to update people on whatever it is that you can't tell them just yet.
Thank you. We're at time.
Thank you.
Got you. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks.
Okay, is there anyone else signed up for public comment? No, anyone else that wants to write public comment? No. All right, we are actually going to adjourn into a executive session, ORS 192.660 regarding real property transactions. And I believe we will be coming back into
It's likely.
public session, likely coming back to public session. So we have to clear the room to